Hi everyone, this is Lolita, and this is the second part of my tonal drawing, ink drawing video for my beginning drawing class. I hope you enjoy. Thanks. This is where I began shading in the background, doing a little bit more of all of my black areas. And as you can see, I'm doing outlines for each of the objects that I have near that black border, and then I go in and do the cross hatching. Just like you've seen in other videos, I don't leave the paper stationary. I move it around and get it in a position that is going to best suit the drawing for the area that I need to actually render with the ink pen. So now that I've finally gotten in all of my black, I am going to go to shading my dark gray, and that's going to be all of this background in here, some of this cloth in here, and I am going to see how long it takes to get this done. I'm going to do an outline because that's what I want to do. I'm going to outline my background, which was my bounding box, and just use what I've already got there. Move that over a little. Got a little fat down here. I think I'm gonna fill that in down there too, and since I went a little outside, I am going to stay a little outside, and so at least I have that consistent with my drawing. Just keep that consistent. I'm wiping the edge off of my ruler just to make sure it doesn't smudge. So I'm putting this on the inside, so this way if I pull it away, at least it's going to smudge or smear into where I'm going to have value anyway. I keep it out of my white border area. So this is a really cheap ruler, and I've got to get used to that. So it's funny how we can get spoiled by our materials. So I'm framing this into, I'm going to just overshoot that a little because I don't want to make a little jaggedy edge where the ruler ends. So this time I think I've learned my lesson, and I'm going to hold the ruler down with the end on the entire length, so this way I don't have that slippage I keep getting. Lining it up so it's nice and neat. There we go. And holding it down the whole way. Now I'm going to move my hand down here to get a little more security down at the bottom of this. And there we are, again pulling it inside just on the off chance that it does a smudge. And let's see, I think I want to think about the strokes here. So I'm going to, this moves out a little on the, rounds out a little here, so I'm going to indicate that little amount of bellow in there, and I'm going to, I said I was through with the shading black, but I'm going to make a nice little separation in here and shade this in a little more black in here. Take this up and shade in this little shadow that I've got here. I'm resituating it in a slightly different place than where it was indicated before. So this piece of fabric goes all the way back here like this, and this comes back in and loads like this. So I'm going to re-emphasize that to make it a little more dramatic there. This comes around and this is a little bit of a roll, so I'm going to indicate a little bit of that there. Just play with what's happening in my drawing here. So that I'm going to do some outlining here, again with the taking liberties. I'm going to outline all my little objects here, so that way I keep them nice and separate from the background, and that's how I want to do it. Taking that down there. Moving my paper around so I can access the areas that I'm drawing on just a little better. Then do the tip of that. See, make sure I've got that balanced right. That feels like it's in the middle. I'm going to take this down just a little more, straighten up that edge there. And this goes around over here, and I'll take that up and keep that arc where it's nice and in the middle. Just clarify that edge a little more there now that I'm in that area. So this back here, I'm going to go the direction of the cloth and move it this direction. And I'm putting in just a deeper layer. Like, let's see if 1 is black, so this is going to be a number 2 here in value. And move it over, get a little roll going. Let that go up a little in value. And take that, and I'm going to take it around and add a little contour to that area while I'm loading the value in there. This fabric, it drapes more down this way. It does round here, so it does this rounding in here. I'm going to mimic that just a little, and this is still going to be a number 2 in value, but I'm playing with the contour of my lines so that way I can get a little bit more depth and dimension, even with trying to use the same value going back through and getting more depth and dimension by virtue of the contour of the lines. And see how that works out for me. So I want to round this a little more to indicate a curve in that fabric. Maybe just play with the sense of the curve a little more. And then this is going to follow that a little. Get in here, go dark. I know if I can go a little lighter than the value that I want to, because I can always go in and go darker, but what I'm not going to be able to do with the pen is go back in and go light. So that's not going to be an option. So it makes more sense if I'm going to do this is to leave it a little lighter than I might want it, because that way I can go back in and modify it to be darker and make sure my tones match, or try to get my tones to match anyway. I'm going to go all the way up here. Try to be a little more deliberate with my lines. Take this all the way down. Okay. So still just playing with that idea of the value structure that I'm putting in. Building that value. Playing with the contour of the fabric too. There's a little bit of a bend in here, so I'm going to try to describe that bend, see if I can make that work. Reinforce that in through here and back down, back down. So this is also really taxing on me physically. Drawing sometimes seems like it's a passive thing to do with your time, but it is really, it physically exerts you. It is exerting. I'm going back in here and let's look at the direction I want to put this. I want to have this go from here, do a little bit of a bend in through there and there. And other than that, I think I can make my lines. All right, so I feel I'm understand where I want my lines. Got a little bit too deep into there. I'll just make it look like contour of the bottom of that tube of paint. Get in here, make that darker. Get the lines pushed right up to the other object so that way it gets a sense of the separation of objects, and each object can keep its own identity. Moving through here again, and just adding value in there, trying to keep that fabric flowing a little bit directionally. So this I can see I can go back in and make it a lot more dark in here. And I'll load more value in here to show this as more black, deeper in there, and I want to get rid of some of that linear look to it and darken that up in there too. Take that right up to the edge, get rid of that line. So I can go back in there, and if I see too many areas where I don't like how much white is showing through, I can drop that down in value by just adding more ink, making it darker, literally. So take this down here and I'll put that fabric, I'll put them in two different directions. This is going to go here and it rounds around again, so I'm going to describe part of the contour of the fabric at the same time as I'm describing the value. And it dips a little more, changes direction, and then changes direction again, and so my pen's getting skippy on me again, changing direction again. Trying to go through and make a little bit of that pattern come through. Sort of an S pattern. Take it all the way to the edge. Sort of an S pattern. And then here I feel like I can just take these in through here like this to add more value into there. If I'll go back in and compare it when I have more areas completed in. So I'm going to take this and this is going to be darker in here. So this is all going to be a black. I'm going to shade that in. I feel like I can go in a direct up and down pattern here. Take that right to the edges of the shapes that I'm interested in having this value. Take that right up to the edge of that tip there. And I'll be going closer with this real soon, but I want to keep the my edges really nice and defined, so if I go too fast, at least for me, I lose control of my edges, and I don't want to lose control of my edges. I want my edges to shine and keep each object identified as its own unique thing. So this paper really warps when you put too much force on it. Force in the way of mark making even, because it's only sketch paper and a little sketch pen. So I'm going to turn this around and see what I think of it. I think I can be happy with that. I'm going to outline that skull up there, have some tea, and then I'm going to fill in the rest of that background and start getting into my shading my little objects here. So I'm going to go in here, pull that out from underneath the my skeleton's head. Go in here, there's the tip of that skull. Chinese medicine, might call that the bogway point. So move down here like this and take that right up to the eye bone there. And now I've got my skull nice and delineated there too. And it's time to shade in that background just a little more. So all of this back here needs to go way darker. This is going to be just changing that contour, make it more, go a slightly different direction, see if I can get a sense of movement in the cloth. I'm going to move this around this direction so I can go up against this border here. Just make it more physically conducive to the physical situation I'm sitting in, and the accessing the points in the paper that I need access to. So trying to get those to agree as much as possible. You don't have to just leave your paper sitting in the one direction. You can move it around so you can access areas, make it easier for you to get the drawing done. So some positions, depending on what area you're trying to reach, it's going to be easier to switch those around. So I think I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to go over here and get some more, since I'm doing the cross hatching, I'm going to get some more horizontal lines going all the way to the corner, so that way I keep my drawing cohesive. The shading of my drawing, it's cohesive. Take this, and if I see any little blank areas that need a little more attention, I'm going to go in there and address those. Again, and this is all in the name of keeping my drawing cohesive. So I feel like there is a nice sense of fabric in there. I'm going to make all of this just a lot more vertical, not worry about the direction of it too much, because it's all basically vertical, and I think just even with making lines, I'll wind up with some sense of movement happening in there. So again, working with my towels, my paper towels, I'm just going to make most of these lines in here vertical. And this is all going to be about the same value as this here in the background. I'll probably assign a little movement to it with when I add more value, build up that value. Take that right up to the line, right up to the line, taking it down. You see I've got a squiggle in here, so I'm going to actually start squiggling in here because I had indicated a squiggle in there before, and I might as well take advantage of that information I put in there. Going right up to the line of the skull again, so this way I can control my borders, my edges, because I want my edges to be really crisp where they belong, crisp. And I think with the background and the foreground, and especially with the skull, it's got so much contrast, the white skull compared to the dark black fabric in the background, because that's what my setup is, as I've shown. And I'll do a little compare and contrast at the end so we can see the setup and the drawing. See if I can get those side by side for you. So my pen's working a lot better today. I don't know what the deal was last night, why it wasn't working, but it sure was not. Taking that right up to the skull so I don't have little too much variation between the fabric, just because the skull is there. I don't want it to be underdrawn. So again, with going back, I can always make my value darker, but what I can't do is make it lighter with pen. So I'm keeping my lines farther apart than I know they need to be. But again, this gives me room to go in and darken it up to the degree I want it to, as opposed to letting it, getting those borders really mixed up with each other. So I'm trying to make that disappear a little, that big hard shadow, taking that in there, doing a little bit of a transition. I think I'm going to try to finish up this whole area here before I move on to the rest of the paper. There's no real strategy that I had pre-planned, but I'm just sort of making it up as I go along, responding to how I feel what the drawing is asking of me, what the situation is asking of me. So I'm doing the same thing here, where I'm taking my cross hatches right up to the skull and dragging them away in this direction. So I'll start it right at the skull and drag it away in this direction. I've already decided I'm going to be doing a fairly linear weave here with my cross hatching, so that allows me the freedom of understanding how I'm going to pace my strokes. Take those all the way up to this line here. And I see I can extend them all the way over here into this area. I do have some movement still happening back there with those other squiggly lines I put in, still building up that value. Then going back in here and going from the top of that border, holding my paper down to get my drawing situation a little more steady. Without it being in the book, it makes it a little more wobbly. So again, with doing something of a regularly paced stroke, and starting from the top of that line, and it allows me to come up with more of a rhythm for my strokes if I have a similar area to cover, or if I'm covering so I know I've got these lines I can make a certain length, and if I just keep that same rhythm going with my drawing, I can get it moving a little faster. So I do have something of a line building up there, but I think that's okay. It just gives it a little more depth. So taking this here, and I'm going to take some lines through, see if I can get some of that idea of that planted there a little removed. So it feels a little more comfortable from this direction. I hope you can see it. I don't want to stop and check the camera to make sure this is in view, but I will, yes. Okay, and I feel sometimes that, like, I'll get my little rhythm a little off. And I'm going to go and start filling in all of this area over here all the way up to this shadow, the edge of the shadow here. Then I'm going to go back in and do my cross hatching the other way. I like the cross hatching because it just feels like I've got more control over it. I feel like I've got it, I like the coverage it offers me, the thoroughness of the coverage, the saturation of the ink, if you will. So yeah, I think I like how that looks. Let me pick that up with my... So now I'm going to go back in and do my cross hatching the other direction, again with, this is the cloth I want to use, and just taking that in there, getting a little tighter weave on some of this. And then I want to try to see if I can get rid of some of that darkness in there. So I'll go around it and with my cross hatching, so that way I leave a certain amount of white still showing through. See if I can get rid of a little bit of that pattern that the build-up of those strokes made. Get in here, go a little slower, be a little more deliberate with where the mark actually goes instead of so loosey-goosey. I think overall I like how that's turning out. So get in here again and be really careful and deliberate around the skull, around the outlines. Looks like I got into the skull, so I'm just going to chisel that down a little and make that point a little more exaggerated. Maybe go in there and darken that up just a little too, drop a little more shadow in behind the head because I can, and I think I'm going to wind up doing that here too, where I go in and really darken this up really nice and super black in there. And again, that's just because I can, and that's what I really like that idea of the just almost a deeper cast shadow in there. Yay. All right, now time to go back in and start doing these cross hatchings up here. I'm going to do these a little more slowly, see if I can, how long I can get a stroke going and still stay in the line that I want. So here we go. That feels like a fairly long stroke. Feel comfortable with this because I know I want these to stay fairly straight and I don't really have to deal with too many edges over here. So I don't have to be as careful as I am when I'm working near edges. Alright, so I'm going to jump all the way down here now and start filling that in. And again, I think I'm just going to leave these fairly straight back here. The fabric hangs fairly straight, and we'll just move the drawing a little faster and still keep the integrity of the form of the fabric. Let's go down here. Those wind up being a little farther apart than I'm interested in having them be. Take this and again just make those marks where they're a little closer together, where I'm more interested in seeing them. Go down here and do the same thing next to my brush, where I am just a lot more deliberate around my edges because I don't want to ruin my edges or take that into an area where it doesn't belong. So even if I wind up doing the same value, I'll probably do the strokes a different direction just to give the two surfaces a separation if it comes down to that. I'm going to do these on something of an angle to describe a little bit maybe the angle the light might be hitting it. And just add a sense of dimension. I hope it works and doesn't look too strong directionally. If it does, I'll go back in and break up that directionality with lines going in a different direction. Turn it around there, give it a look from a different perspective, see what I think. All right, I think I'm going to go in with some horizontal lines in here too. I can make it a little darker. I've got room in here to go a little darker, and then that'll take the lines a little bit of a different direction, and I feel it'll make it more cohesive with the fabric around it. But I'm still going to leave that a little bit more of an open weave than the black. So it still stays lighter than the pure black. Put a little bit of an even pace in here. So my pen is definitely working better than it was yesterday. I've got like ink deposits happening today, so that's sort of good. I don't mind that I'm getting like little blobs in the background. It doesn't take away from the shading as far as I can see. It just sort of adds a little bit more character. So I'm going to take these, and I feel like I want to go horizontal again to be in conversation with the values next to it, the way I shade it, rather the shapes next to it, and the values, the value shapes next to it. And this way it's just, you know, it retains a sense of cohesiveness. And if I just drag this all the way into there, that's going to be okay. If it makes this in here, the black a little darker, that's going to be okay. That's starting to look like a weave that I may not want, but I think I can get rid of that fairly easily with going in and being a little more deliberate with the direction of my stroke. Just filling in where it falls short in some areas. Going all the way up to that edge, so that way I again just stay cohesive and retain consistency in my drawing. And there's some of those lines that I was mentioning, or the globs of ink, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing here in this situation. So time to go in here and bring out, add to that value. Still keeping that cohesive weave. Trying to get rid of like where the value might be settling more in some areas. So, or where the weave is just a little too open. So I feel that gets rid of it fairly nicely. I'm going in here and I will see how long I can make my strokes. And the physical limitations of my body don't want the strokes to be very long, so but here we go. And then those are going to be farther apart than I want them to be. But that's okay. Right now, that's just what my body is allowing me to do. And it looks like I'm getting some black on my knuckles, which just means papers, that ink in there is still a little too wet, and I should keep my little fingers out of the places where I've drawn in already. Here we go, more lines, and yes, they're farther apart than they eventually will be, but I'll go back in and plant more. Plant more. Put them right up against that edge. And then I'm going to do the same thing here where and now I can take some of that ink off of my nib, because I do have the ink flowing really good now. Again, I really don't know what happened with this pen yesterday, why it decided to freak out and not deposit on the paper very well. So some of that looks like it's a little too far apart. Take these and see how close I can get these lines. All right, that's looking fairly regular. I think that's okay. These are getting a little further apart than I want them to be, so that means I'm just going to have to go back in there. Getting a little bit of waviness in there, and that too is okay. It just adds a little bit of more of a relaxed look to the fabric. The fabric weave doesn't have to be so tight, and it'll add a little bit more to the overall direction. Make this look a little loose, so that way it has a little bit of a not so much tension in it, but a little bit of slack in the fabric. So I think I'm going to go in here and darken this up this direction, add a little bit more to the sense of this fabric moving in through here and having a shadow in the fabric, and then go back in and weave that in, integrate it a little better. Fill in some of those big wide open gaps. Darken that area up a little more. I feel it's a little too light in here, so I'm going to add some strokes in there. Just go in, and where I see some areas where that weave is just a little too open, go in there and try to drop more marks in there to close it up. So I can close this a little in here too. Make that a little more consistent between that area right above the head and this fabric. Integrate it a little more in value. So I feel like I can take one line directly up there. All right, I think I'm getting comfortable with that. This feels like I need to make this weave a lot tighter. And then this was what I mentioned before, where I could go back in, and even though I knew I was putting those lines farther apart than I wanted them to be, I could go back in, and it's happening again, folks. My pen is working like a charm today, and so I've got all of these little areas where I've got more value, or like I got ink blobs. I can call it value, but it's a mistake. And the mistake, you know, mistakes happen in art. It's art, it's not perfection. And so you try to figure out ways to absorb the mistake. Just another problem to solve. That's what art is about quite a bit, is about problem solving. You have problems that are before you, specific things to work out, and you figure out ways to make them work in ways that you don't have to do with other things. I think I'm going to take this and just swing this around a little by darken it up and just adding a little bit more slack to the fabric by changing the direction of some of those lines, so that way they're not so straight. It adds like I said, just a little bit more slack to the fabric, so it doesn't have so much tension. Straight lines show tension. Curvy lines show they're a lot more relaxed. So that's looking sort of funky in there. And that's because I've got too much value variation happening in there still too. This weave down here is just way too open still. I don't have enough of a vertical line balance there coming in through here. So I've got a good horizontal happening in there, but not my vertical. So I'm going back in and doing those a little more vertical. I think I can live with that. So now it's time to go in here and play around with this surface. So this surface comes out here. Let's see, that's there. This sort of goes here and out like that. I'm going to just try to make some of these little areas, emphasize them so I can be a little bit more free with my stroke once I go into it. This comes in here and it's a little boxier in through here. That's what's happening in through here. This does do this, and then this comes up over this way. This comes in through here and is a little thinner in there. This turns around and is fairly deep right in there, so I'm going to plant that just a little darker. And here this is, all of this back here is darker, and that goes in like that. So now I can take this and I'm going to go ahead and do what I've been doing and outline my objects that are here, so what I can keep just a nice delineation, and I know exactly where I want to stop with my lines. So this is all going to go this direction, and I'll probably play around with that just a little, get it to shift a little more vertically there. That is going to be slightly darker in here. Then I'll take this and slant that curve in there. Do I like that direction? Yes. Let me take it in this way just a little in here too, so I don't have it so strong in there with just the one direction. This is all coming out at me, so I'm going to do something of a linear perspective with these lines in here. Take them up to that edge. This is about in front of me, right exactly the straightest point. So I'm going to take those lines, they're going to be a lot more vertical, and then I'm going to move them over like this. And again, that almost gives you that sense of working with linear perspective. It gives you a sense of that 2-point perspective or a 1-point perspective, but linear perspective where you're still dealing with the idea of converging parallel lines. So I'm making that surface a little on the converging parallel line side. This comes out about this far. So in this in here is like an uneven box edge. So then I'll take these down a different direction than the ones above it and play around with the idea of the movement of the fabric that way. This comes here a little, and this all goes down about that direction, or at least I'm willing to make it look like it's going that direction. Come down here, and I'm going to turn those a little to give it a sense of a bowing in there. Then it flips a little and goes a little more in, so I'm going to take that direction and try to lead the eye around like that, where it's, I want this to go back just a little bit more that way. So I'm playing with my lines to direct my viewer's eye. So here I think I'm just going to take this and go this direction with here. Describe that surface almost as how it's moving horizontally. So this here is, I'm going to move this fabric down this direction. And then take it vertically this direction. Have it come down a little vertically here. And then this is going to be a little more vertical here. Till it gets in through here, and then it does this in here. This rolls around this direction, so I'm going to try to lead my viewer's eye in that direction just a little by rolling it in through here directionally, taking these and going down this direction. See if I can play with the that direction of the fabric and keep my values close to the same. Seeing if I can do that. So I'm going to take that and add that there. This is a little darker in here where it comes around like this. I'm going to try to really describe that in there as a turn. Take this in here, and this is just going to be slightly lighter, but still keep it turning in through here. This comes back in this direction and goes a completely different direction. It comes here and falls and turns around again. This here is it does go all the way up here to this edge, so I'm going to darken that, take that up a little, and make that more of a black in there. And again, roll this around the corner, see if I can get this looking like a tube of sorts. And then this Alright, and now I want this to come around. I'm going to give a sense of slack in through here. See if I can make that happen with the contour of the marks. And see if I can get this to round just a little there. And take that over, round these down. Take that over there. This is a lot farther apart. And that's probably farther apart than I'm actually seeing. So, but again, I can go back in and make that darker if I want, but I can't go back in and lighten it up if I've put too many marks in. I'm going to have to leave them where I put them. So this fabric, I'm going to describe it going directionally like that, piling up the value a little behind here, just darkening it up in there, show a sense of separation. This fabric I will have go vertically. For the most part, it's going to go vertical. Do a little bit of a shift over here. Take that right up to the edge. Right up to the edge. And then I'm going to add a little directionality here. Put that going in here. Have this almost as if it's coming around, bulging out this direction. Having it come around a little more. Darkening it up because it's too light in here. Again, with going right up to the edge of the object that it is next to, showing no fear in doing that. I've already got my edges in there nicely established. I want a really good sense of a shift in value between this fabric and the watercolor palette that's in front of it. So I'm going back in there and darkening this up, giving myself more of those horizontal marks, and filling this out. Feel fairly comfortable that I can take that in there and move it like that, starting where I have that edge. So I just have a slightly different pace, so it looks like there is some type of fold going on, even though those values are going to be very similar. Those areas are going to be very similar in value. So this comes around, and this almost does this type of movement in through here. So I'm going to describe that there. This comes in and moves in that way. This comes back in and it's almost does this vertical stretch in through here. And so I'm going to take all of these and shade this in this direction. Again, with getting that value in there. That's a little too light in here. I want to break that up. Take that value down. I want that edge broken up. This fabric comes here and it rolls around a little here, so I'm going to get a little bit of a roll happening in here, turning that, and then it comes down straight, so it does something of this type of movement in here. So I'm going to take that up from this direction, from that direction, all the way from here. Take it all the way down to the edge of my watercolor palette. I am going to be going back in, putting these lines in closer because I want the value to be darker, but this just allows me to control my edges. You might find that you don't need to do that to control your edges, but that's what's working for me, so that's what I wind up doing. And very often what works for one person will work for lots of other people. So that's the whole point of watching demo videos or watching what other people do, is because, yeah, we learn from other people. Okay, here we go. Putting in the darkness in there. Got a little out of control. That's okay. Just dropping more value in there, taking those lines across. I think I'll go in here with some lighter strokes to break up the regularity of these gaps, because I don't want these gaps so regular. And then these back here just look a little too light, so I'm going to take and add a little more value to them, dropping more marks in here. This back here is really undeveloped, so I'm just going to take that and darken all of that up in there. And okay, I'm relatively happy with that. This cup now, let's see, in here, I get to go in here and I'm going to still separate this from the background. I can go in through here and separate the top of my ellipse here from the background. Go in here, leave something of a thickness of that edge, leave something of the thickness of that edge, do a nice little arc. Take that back like that. Okay. And now I get to go in and do some real nice close-knit shading. This is going to be, I'm going to put this down, going straight down. Again, just following the contours of the cup, going around that ellipse. Going in here because this is the direction of that contour. That surface is horizontal and then this one curves around, so I'm following that, the surface contours here. Take that around like that. Do the same thing in here where I've got a, I'm going to go down to about right there, show a little bit of that, the edge of the cup. Take this down here where I've got this drawn out all the way over to here, and I'm going to drop all of this down. These are all going to be horizontal, and so it's you see I've got a much smaller area, so I'm going way more controlled with my strokes, and take that right up to the edge of the brush. And that's terrific. I overshot there. That's okay. Again, with the following the contour of the cup, taking those marks around like that. And then in here, this is going to be a little darker in here where that shadow is cast in through there, and that's like the shadow of the brush there. And then it goes down here and catches the contour of the cup. This is a little darker in here, so I'll leave that all the way black. I'm going to go again with the vertical lines because that surface is a vertical surface, and then come back in again with the contour lines of that rounded edge of that back surface. This I'm going to go in with contour lines, having them come around like that, and then again with more contour lines, and those are again these are vertical lines in here, and so then that does a real nice job of establishing the inside of that cup. I've got some really good contour happening in there. This I have labeled as a 2, but I think that's a little too dark. If oh no, 2 is light, so that's fairly light in there. I have that a 3, so I think I went a little backwards because I am, yeah, 1 is supposed to be black, and so this 2, this should be 3, and that should be a 2 in there. So I'm going to go in here and do the bottom edge of my cup here. Go in here, do the side edges of my cup. Going around here. Again with establishing the edge in here. I'm going to do the same thing with all of my objects in here. Go in here and establish the hard edges. Hard edge. So you do all of these edges in here. Now that my pen is working, I do need to wipe it down here and there. So going in and putting in some of the details of the barrel of the brush in. Putting in those details of the barrel of the brush. I'm not going all the way through with it just yet because I may want to play with their value structure more than I've drawn. Let's see, I feel like, okay, feel like I captured that contour fairly nicely. May have gone a little too low on that edge. Get in here and take the top of that there, and this overshoots that a little in dimension. There we go. Okay, I think I can live with that. This is fairly dark in there. In here, this is all going to be as dark as the background here. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this in. I don't feel like I need a ruler here on this edge because it's fairly short. And I'm just going to fill that in by hand. And then take this surface and take it out just to a small degree. Again, try to give a little bit of that sense of the converging parallel lines where you get the idea that the surface is moving this direction with the way the lines compel your eyes to move. So it'll give a certain sense of directionality to the surface. See if that's the direction I want. If it's not, I can go in and just alter it slightly by playing with lines in more than one direction. I'm going to take some of these down just a little vertical and take those a little horizontal just to tighten up that general weave in there. And I am going to stop here, take a break.